You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 338, The Mandalorian Sanctuary. This is chapter 4 of The Mandalorian. So during the summertime when typically news is slower, we're taking our time to go back and revisit The Mandalorian, enjoy these shows to the fullest, and really get the benefit of having seen all of them and talk about them together. And joining me tonight, as always, is Manny Faces himself. Nice shirt, by the way, there, Mr. Jonesy. How you doing tonight?
Doing well, man. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. I've heard of that show. I've never listened to the podcast, though, so I'm kidding. That's it.
You didn't really miss much. No one else did either.
All right. So I thought we'd start with news, and now to the main show. No, we don't really have any news. There was no whole lot that was happening. We thought we were going to get the Mandalorian season 2 trailer, or at least some kind of a teaser. Right. A number of credible people said this thing was ready to go maybe 5 days ago, whenever that was. It didn't happen. So hopefully it happened. I think we talked about you, myself, Mike. We talked about maybe even doing some kind of a show depending on how much we get. But I think that's imminent. Would you say safe to say that it's imminent? Or
Seems
do you think
like
they're going to delay it?
When did this drop before? Was it October or November when it actually went live? Do you remember?
No, I actually don't. I don't remember that at the top of my head.
No, we usually look at like a 60-day window when we start to see the advertising start to ramp up for it. But you know what? I don't know how much advertising they really need to do for the show,
right?
Especially given the economic environment right now. They may not want to, but yeah, there seems to be a lot of buzz anyway, even outside of normal Star Wars circles. So
that's right.
I think it's going to do all right. I think this is going to be okay.
So if and when that thing drops, we will likely do something. If we don't do it live or immediately thereafter, we'll certainly try to put something together and kind of break down and do some speculation about what you guys can expect. I'm still like slumming it with these head earbuds. My headphones broke and I've sent them off to repair. So I just looked at myself and I'm like, that's kind of weird and ghetto. But anyways, it'll work. All right, let's do this. Let's get into our main show. Let's talk about Sanctuary. Again, chapter 4 of The Mandalorian. I've got a quick synopsis here. It says, on the run and in hiding, the Mandalorian and the child seek refuge in a small and unsuspecting village, only to discover remnants of the Empire are close by. With the help of ex-rebel shock trooper and local townspeople, they manage to put up a front and bring down the Empire, but just before an assassination attempt is made on the child. Now, this episode was written by Jon Favreau, and this is the directorial debut, at least for this series anyways, of Bryce Dallas Howard, who is, we should mention, she is kind of her own person now by a number of ways, but the daughter of Ron Howard, who did Solo and had some ties back there with George Lucas during the American Graffiti days as well. But before we get into this before we get into the off-screen, on-screen things, but just how are you feeling about this episode? Because by now, this is our 4th one. We're getting into a groove. We're starting to really understand who the Mandalorian is. We get to see the child. We've had the benefit of Kuriel, and now this is our 4th character being introduced. But do you feel like this show is really kind of picking up its stride, or do you think it just it's always been there and we're just still benefiting for it at this point?
Well, what I remember about going into this episode was we've now left we've kind of left the safe confines of what we expected the show to be. And this is where it started to branch in a direction we weren't sure of. Right.
Yeah.
I think that was what was exciting about it though, too. It was the thing that we, what direction does it now go that he's got child in tow, but also we're not in bounty hunter mode anymore.
Right.
We're in kind of preserve and protect and, open exploration. And so I think that was really exciting to be able to experience and see where they wanted to take it. And when we started getting glimpses of what this episode was going to entail, especially with the chicken walker, it was super exciting. It's always going to be the chicken walker.
Yeah.
It said it in parentheses on the toy box. So that's what it is.
It's canon.
Chicken walker.
Chicken walker.
It's Kenner, Hasbro, canon.
Yes.
But yeah, so I thought that was what was exciting about this. We finally get to branch in some direction that we don't have any expectations of what to do. And then we get to see your girl, Gina Carano, of course.
Well, look at that. What a coincidence. I seem to have a picture of her right behind me. That's, it was hard to find one picture I didn't like for this. Okay, so let's talk about the off-screen stuff. So come to find out, Pedro Pascal who obviously does the voice for the Mandalorian. First off, he wasn't in this episode at all. Like it was all, and I always forget their names, but he's got two actors or two stunt doubles or whoever that
Right.
play those roles and fill in for him. But he obviously did the voices for that. But this is all without Pedro Pascal. Now, again, I had the benefit of knowing this a couple weeks ago, but prior to, I wouldn't have known. Like I think those actors, credit to them, I think they do a really good job of portraying Pedro Pascal. Now that said, I'll let you speak to this, but I don't know. It's all blurred, right? I think they've done a good job. I couldn't tell you who's Pedro and who's not, and I think that's a credit to all of them and working really closely together on the character.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sometimes when you see stunt doubles and come in, you can always tell something's unique about them, especially with children, because the muscle tone and things like that. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it helps that they're fully armored and you have lots of costuming on and things like that. So they blend in a lot better. But I remember when this came out, when this news kind of surfaced, I think it upset some people that Pedro Pascal was not in any of it at all.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a little surprising to me. I mean, it's a very action oriented episode and things like that. So you could argue that he could have been in some of it, but I didn't think it was really that big of a deal. But it was interesting that the actor is just not there, and now you start to wonder how much is he really in?
Right.
You
Who's
just
the real
never know.
Mandalorian?
Yeah.
I went so far as to, in the scene later on when the chicken walker's standing there and it's got its bright light shining, there's that one frame where the Mandalorian's helmet is like up, the light's hitting the helmet. And if you pause it, you can see the facial, you can see the nose and the bone structure of whoever's under the mask. I wasn't able to tell actually it was him, but I was really looking like, okay, can I tell that that's not Pedro Pascal? It didn't look like he had a mustache. So maybe there's something there. All right, we're taking this to the nth degree. All right, so that was kind of. Do
you have to have no facial hair if you're Mandalorian too?
I think so. Yeah, this is the way.
This is.
In this episode, it was a lot of it. There's been a lot of talk about Star Wars and some of the influences from the Kurosawa films. And obviously, with this show, we get a lot of influences from the spaghetti westerns and westerns in general, for the most part. But this was the one that was, and I'm not going to say a carbon copy, but it was very close to what we saw in Seven Samurai, which is a Kurosawa film. It had moments of that. There's a moment in there where the two guys come up to the Mandalorian when he's repairing his ship. And that's very similar to Hidden Fortress. So there's some kind of ties to that as well. When Hidden Fortress is kind of, a lot of the inspiration came for Star Wars Episode 4 from Hidden Fortress. And then on top of this isn't the first time we've seen it. Like there's an episode of the Clone Wars, and the title escapes me, but I think there's an episode very similar to this where they take some normal everyday people, arm them, and overcome whoever it was, like bandits or raiders or whoever it was. So it's not the first time it's been done in Star Wars, but this is the first time obviously we've seen it live action. But I guess had you ever seen the Seven Samurai before? Or even here's a better question: they did the Magnificent Seven. Did you ever see that more recent movie of? It was kind of a remake of it all.
Yeah, I've seen parts of it. Yeah, and so I haven't seen Seven Samurai, but it's just one of those movies that I never made time for. But you when you have classic movies like that, and you've seen others borrow from it over time, you just recognize the themes in it, or the way that the shots are framed, and some of the general storylines, depending on what material you're drawing from. So it's interesting how, even if you haven't seen those, and when someone points things out to you, it's just kind of second nature that your brain is like, yeah, that seems really familiar to me for some reason, and part of it's because, again, we've seen it so many different times. And I think it's really cool. I mean, this is one thing we've talked about. I think we've talked about this every week since we've been doing this, is that there are all sorts of callbacks and inspiration, homages, or whatever you guys call it.
Homage.
Yeah. So all of these things keep getting worked into the show, which I think is really, really cool. Of how do we keep drawing this inspiration from what came from George Lucas, and really kind of honoring George Lucas's take on the whole thing as well.
Yeah. And so, just to be clear, like there's certain elements that are taken from Seven Samurai. For example, the villagers being attacked by bandits, either bandits or raiders, right? There's normal everyday people that are constantly getting run over by some other bandit or outlaw group, right? That's one trope here. In Seven Samurai, they were rice farmers. Here, they're krill farmers, which we'll talk about too. Very interesting. It's a deep cut, if you will. Then there's always this montage, or there's always some scene in there where they're training the villagers on how to defend themselves and all of that. So that's kind of taken in all three of these examples so far. And then there's some other elements too and this is really getting into like Josh and Joe's territory when we talk about film appraiser stuff. But the way some of these shots, the way Bryce Dallas Howard used and filmed some of these shots is very similar. And whether she did it intentionally, I don't know. But there are a lot of shots that are almost, I'm not going to say one for one, but you can see where there's some heavy influence in the way she's setting up shots, some of the views themselves, long shots. Josh pointed out a great one in Discord where it shows a chicken walker at a far distance peering. You can see it. It's in the dark, and it's kind of right in front of the village, and it's all in darkness. There's a very similar shot to like in Seven Samurai as well. So there's a lot of influences, not just in the story itself, but in the way the art direction and some of the cinematography and the cameras and all that as well. So that's all credit to her and to the group for really kind of paying tribute to a pretty amazing movie. If you've never had a chance, definitely go watch Seven Samurai. All right, so the opening shot. Let's get to the actual episode. The opening shot, like just seeing the krill, I'm like, is this like? I remember my first experience was, wow, is this like an aquarium? Like, what am I looking at here? Because it was underwater. We were seeing krill, and they, to me they look like shrimp, I guess blue shrimp, but
Right.
it's a deep cut because these krill are like they've used them before, like in just a game, I think, and something. There was something else that had came up, so I don't know why or how they dug that deep to pull out the krill reference, but we're not going to talk. I don't want to talk too much about that.
Well, this isn't the krill dissection.
No, it's not the krill.
Let's take it old school, man.
But yeah, so this is like a very simple village, right? And then this is opening up on Sorgon, I guess is the name of the planet here, or the town. I guess it's the
Right.
planet. No starport, no industrial centers. So this puts them at, I was going back and looking at some old Legends books, and it kind of puts them in the realm of like the Gamorrean planet, where they're not even doing like industrial trade or anything. They're just trading amongst themselves. And it's kind of, pretty close to what the Mandalorian's looking for. We'll talk about that here in a minute. But the first line of their back gives us some insight that they've been constantly attacked by these guys on more than one occasion. And
Right.
we're introduced to, I guess not introduced, but we revisit the Clatunians, which I hadn't seen. Well,
I mean, the Urukai.
yeah, the Urukai, which I mean, at one point when he's holding that thing up and he's yelling and screaming, he's holding the musket. It's like pretty close to the Urukai.
Straight out of Lord of the Rings.
It is. Maybe that was intentional, but I did like that. But we hadn't really seen one. I mean, on film, anyways, we hadn't seen one since Return of the Jedi. Who, was it Barada? Was it Barada?
Yeah,
Barada.
that's right.
So Barada was the one on Return of the Jedi. There was some of these guys in Clone Wars at one point. They were in there. But I gotta ask. So we see them, and they've got these like ballistic. He's holding like a pistol. It looks like a musket, right? A primitive weapon of some sort. We see the laser bolts coming in at the early beginning, and later on, a couple of them when Cara and the Mandalorian go in and raid the village themselves, or they try to weed them out of the village to kind of set the trap. Some of them are using blasters, but I don't know. Did you get a sense that these guys were like, where did they get this isn't answered in this episode by any means, but
Right.
where did they get the technology? Where did they get the arms? Where did they get the ATST? And who the heck was driving that? Which I'd love to hear your thoughts on.
That was the big question for me, was where'd the Walker come from? If this is a planet kind of untouched, why would the Empire even care about it unless there were resources or something there? Which is always possible. Maybe it's going to end up being another Kyber planet. But that was the head scratcher though.
Yeah.
How does that get there? Or did they, because these guys don't bring anything. And so I don't really know. But yeah, I mean, weapons and things like that seem like those are still going to be developed civilizations kind of across the board. And some things are, in Star Wars at least, some things are still universal, that there will be guns, there will be blasters, there will be something resembling a super weapon at some point,
Yeah.
whatever it might be. But yeah, so but where they come from and how they get funded for this type of thing, and the organization behind it, but they're still stealing food,
Right.
effectively, right? I mean, they're just raiding for food for the most part.
Spotchka,
So-
to be exact.
Right, yeah, because they brew spotchka, best on the planet.
Best on the planet. Yeah, I think you're right. And there's something else we'll get to here in a minute that I think kind of alludes to the Empire having a presence here at one point, one day, maybe, obviously before the fall of the Empire itself. But
Right.
there are some other clues that kind of lead us down that path. All right, so from there we cut over to the Mandalorian. Again, we have another great parenting moment here where he's stop touching things. Baby Yoda's sitting there trying to grab that little knob, and I don't know if this is parent moment number 4 or 5.
Flipping the switch. Yeah.
He's flipping the switches, and there were some great memes that were done with that where they made it so he's like playing with music and then turning off the music, and then Mandalorian turning back the music on. But if you have children or you plan on having children, you're going to experience something very similar to this at some point. Sometimes it's electric sockets, but whatever, all kinds of fun things that kids try to do.
Right.
And then his plan though was to kind of lay low, and I think I know the answer to this, but any other reason why he would want to lay low other than just to let the dust settle on what just happened with him and having bounty hunters go after him, or do you think there was anything more here?
I'm curious where you're going to go with this, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, so he says the plan is to kind of lay low for a few months, and he doesn't like what the events that kind of take place here lead him in the direction that he eventually goes, obviously in episodes 5 and 6 and throughout the rest of it. But do you think he was going to lay low, or do you think, hey, if I can find a planet that is nice and calm and quiet, I could maybe retire here as well? Or do you think he had any intention of just laying low, or was it just lay low and dump the kid off if the opportunity presents itself?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, lay low, let the heat bump, kind of cool off. And I think some of those other things were extra bonus type of things.
Mm-hmm.
Was he ever going to retire? No, that's not really his style. It doesn't sound like. And I mean, they kind of speak to that by the end of the episode too, right? It's pretty clear that, he has this opportunity, but he'll make a different choice. But yeah, I don't think he had any plans of any of that, because again, they're looking for just a backwater hole that has absolutely no life on it, if possible.
Yeah.
But if any of those other things happen, I mean, what we're presented in the episode on is just more of an opportunity than anything else, until things go south towards the very end. But yeah, I would just think that it was just really just pretty much at face value. It was just to lay low, get off the radar, and somehow shake people off their trail if there was any kind of heat coming.
Right. And there was also, I called this a pet owner moment where he's like, stay here, don't, stay right here. Do you understand? Don't move. And then next thing you know, he's like standing right behind him, which I thought was funny. So we get the parent moments, we get the pet moments, plenty of stuff here for everybody involved. And we finally get to the Sorgan Lodge. And this is where I feel like there's got to be more here that's going on, because there's a lot of people here. So Krill can't be the only thing they're doing, right? This planet's huge. And, Cara kind of alludes to that. Planet's big, go move somewhere else. They got to be probably doing something else. And they do mention logging is another thing that happens here. So they've got Krill, they've got logging. I don't know that the Empire would necessarily need logging, but there's a very diverse group of people once we get to the lodge. If you look around, there's a Twi'lek that shows up, some other alien races that we've never seen before, some we have. So again, you don't get, you can't have like an isolated, quaint planet, much less a village, out in the middle of nowhere in the outer rim, and then have a very diverse group of population, unless something was bringing all these different species here. So you've got to think that there was something else. Again, I think it was, who was it? Brick Public Clones had mentioned that maybe there was a mining facility here, or maybe some sort of factory, and that's kind of where my head goes. Is there probably was something here at one point. Maybe
some sort of resource.
Yeah, exactly. Unbeknownst to the people, local people too. I mean, for all we know, the Empire was just pillaging and keeping people out, and never really disclosing what they were doing here. But but yeah, so anyways, the point of that was just there was a very diverse group of people here, and nobody looked like space travelers either. So it kind of, he says there's no port, right? So it doesn't look like there's a lot of interstellar traffic going back and forth, at least not by this point here.
And that's the thing. I mean, even if the Empire was there, they would have had to build a port, and they wouldn't have taken it with them, most likely. There would be remnants of it, even if it were dilapidated or something like that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone has settled into this local life. Now, if they've cut off transportation, if all transportation, evaporated, maybe there was a port and it's just not on the maps and it's not anywhere close by. So you could say that those things exist too. And we probably have to suspend belief and just assume that something like that is true, because all of these different species don't just show up on a planet.
Yeah.
Like this. Yeah. Especially ones that we recognize.
And here's SP with the conspiracy theories. There are special trees with organic kyber crystals glowing inside them.
Kyber tree.
And kyber, well, then Brick Public Clone says midichlorian trees. So.
Oh boy, someone had to go there.
Hey man, midichlorians are in everything, right? All living things. So yes, to some extent that is a true statement. There's a surprise little pet that we see, a guest, I guess, if you will, with the Loth cat. This is Dave Filoni rearing his head here. Right. I was really excited about this. I know it sounds kind of silly and trivial, but I was really excited to finally see one I guess, see one on screen or live or in person. But I think they did a good job with it. Now, why it was feral or mean? I mean, they were never really that mean that I remember in Rebels, but I could be wrong.
Territorial, I guess. But
Maybe it was.
yeah, Dave Filoni flexing that executive producer muscle.
Yep. We're putting a Lothcat, man. He's going to be right there in that scene.
But that was, I mean, it was cool though to see it. It was a complete surprise. Didn't see it coming, and you definitely got the Dave Filoni stamp, which I think was, I think we all enjoyed that for the most part.
Yeah, and unless you're unless you're a big Star Wars fan or you know what you're looking for, that just seems like a cat and like something a feral or wild cat or a cat that was territorial doing. But there was obviously more to that as well.
Right.
And then finally, we're introduced to Cara Doom. Now, she's sitting there in the tavern, the lodge, and she seems kind of standoffish at him. We kind of come to find out why a little bit later, but Mando like singles her out, right? He goes after her, like he's purposely wanting to know exactly why she's here. I think I have my own thoughts, and it's not rocket science, but what are your thoughts? Why was he singling her out here? Why was he wanting to know more about her out of all the other people, outside of the fact that she just stands out?
Yeah, I mean, she stood out. Her clothes stand out. He probably recognized that she was evaluating probably the same things that he's evaluating. And she was assessing him just as much as he was assessing her and noticed her. And so I think his military people tend to stand out a little bit. You don't always, and not everybody, but I mean, some military folks, it's just, hey, were you in the military? Because they just have this vibe to them, this confidence and this, this type of stature as well. And Cara Dune, I mean, she very much exuded a lot of that too. It was by herself, kind of a loner, badass looking chick. And, just, yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
More information. Yeah.
And she says that she's got to, they end up getting into a tussle and we're kind of skipping over the fight, which we'll come right back to. But she says that, hey, I thought you had a fob on me. And she kind of leaves it at that. It's kind of a casual comment. And you think, okay, probably not a big deal, right? She's obviously killed a number of warlords and maybe they've put out bounties on her or anything there. But do you think it was anything more than that? Do you think she has a dark past, or do you think it's pristine, if you will, given that she was former rebel and then went to the New Republic, became a peacekeeper, and then decided to get out of there because that's what she was, paid to do? Doesn't seem like a bad job, but go on.
Right. We could turn this really dark, and we can kind of go Rogue One conspiracy type of side of,
do it.
What if she's a deserter, and would the fob be from the New Republic? That's a little bit dark. We're probably not going to go that path.
Well, and to be honest, I like the idea. Like she's right now, as far as we know, she is kind of like this model person. She served in the rebellion, very, very noble of her. And then she went to go fight for the New Republic. And because she wasn't doing, she was just doing peacekeeper type stuff and no longer headhunting or in combat or doing, war type events, she decided, okay, this is really not what I signed up for, and I want to get out of it. That seems like a plausible kind of, reason why she would leave. But I think it's more interesting to your point. I think it would be more interesting if there was something more there that kind of creeps up a little bit later in season 2 or season 3 and comes back to bite her and comes back to jeopardize or put her new friends at risk that, she hadn't really considered at the time that she kind of made this error or did something wrong.
Right. I mean, it's this, if she's spoiling for a fight, why go to a planet where there is nothing going on? And that was the vibe I got, was that just, she wanted the action. This is what she signed up for. It was, get in there and bash some heads. And, once things settle down, it's not as much fun. So why would you disappear to a backwater planet in order to find more? It just doesn't quite match up. So I'm with you. I hope we get something extra there that would, in season 2, that will give us a little more of that insight about what happened.
Yeah.
Is there a real reason why she left? Because this seems a little convenient.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that as well. They get into the fight, and I mean, and what better person to have than Gina in a fight? Her kind of, that whole thing was, again, it's a stunt double. It's not really Pedro Pascal, but I think there's later on when you watch the behind the scenes stuff, there was, I think it was Jon Favreau or somebody had mentioned that this woman is extremely strong, and at one point she lugged Pedro Pascal over her shoulder and carried him out, and and all that, and that was really her doing it, but. Right. I thought they did a great job, and I love watching her fight. And to be honest, I think she does a great job in this role. She's not any more than she needs to be. She's reserved when she needs to be. Yeah, she kind of has some a little small problems delivering some lines, but for the most part, anytime she's on screen, I mean, she's captivating. You have to watch every move she does, everything she says. You hang on every word that she says because she does a really good job, I think, with the role.
Right. Yeah, she
Um,
does. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, there's really not much to say. I mean,
Yeah.
she doesn't look like a first-time actor,
Right.
for the most part. And so I thought that was really, it's really promising. I mean, that's you've only had a few people be able to make that kind of transition onto the screen and not have it really seem really, really rough, really rough. And then you could probably visualize a few male actors that just don't do it well.
Yeah.
John Cena.
John Cena. He's all right sometimes.
Mm.
He was good in what was the one about the bull?
I-
The animated one.
Oh, Ferdinand?
Ferdinand. Yeah, he was good in that one. I'm really making the John Cena fans mad. Okay, so they were preparing to leave, and she makes a comment that they both can't be on Sorgan, right? For some reason, she says they can't both be there. Any thoughts as to why? I have a theory, and it's not a loaded question, but do you have any kind of theories as to why they can't both be on that planet?
I don't know. Maybe just that one would attract the other. And I mean, it makes sense on a little bit, at least of if someone comes looking for him and they find her, that might, and they know who she is, which seems unlikely at this point, but then she's exposed as well. And plus, if you have two people who are able to do some of these stuff and they do get mixed up and in trouble, it does, it all of a sudden there's a spotlight that somehow might shine on the other person. So
right.
It makes sense that maybe not on the, I don't know if I agree that the entire planet is now off limits, and Mandalorian, his whole, well, they were here first, guess we got to go find another one. Why don't you just go to the other side of the planet and see what's happening over there?
Yep. And that's kind of where my head is too. And we kind of get, I think we get a confirmation of this, a little bit later, but having two people that stand out the way they do, I mean, they obviously stand out in that kind of area. And we get some confirmation of this when those two gentlemen come up and say, "Hey, we need some help. We've got money," that kind of thing. And he realizes when they say we've traveled like all day long. He's thinking, okay, well, they've come from pretty far apart, so it's okay to be on the planet. I just need to be far enough so that we're not close together for a lot of the same reasons, right? I think if somebody's coming to look for him, they might go after her. They'll be attracted to her, vice versa. It's just not good for two outsiders like that to kind of be in the same place as well. But they make this.
We're getting some comments in the chat too. Two people like this in the same town, little village. It's just not good news. So I think we're agreeing with y'all.
Yeah, I think it's this one here. Is it Phil?
Yeah, Phil.
Yeah, town ain't big enough for the both of us. That's exactly right. Yeah, and too much attention drawn to a single place. Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here. Okay, we're gonna talk about. There's a comment that one of the villagers says that aren't Mandalorians, aren't you guys mercenaries, right? And is this Boba Fett's reputation or his legacy creeping up here? Do you think there's enough people that know who Boba Fett is who just assume that Mandalorians equal bounty hunters or Mandalorians equal mercenaries before Mandalorians equal the Mandalorians of what we know of in the Clone Wars? Do you think enough time has passed that they're only seen as mercenaries because there aren't very many of them, and the only one that is, or maybe two if you're the Cobb Vanth theory person, the only two that are out there have been these kind of outlaw mercenary type characters?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, they seem pretty worldly for living in a village for generations. But I imagine, the stories of the Mandalorians, just like stories of the Jedi and the Sith, permeate. They just seem to go throughout time. These things are just everlasting. And then the stories carry on of who they are. And I would have expected them to have a little more bewilderment, I guess, and I don't know, awe, rather than they were very comfortable just, hey,
walking right up
money. Yeah. So what'd you think about his reaction to all of that though? Because you kind of got this really cold shoulder. You have money, no, try to make it worth his while. I mean, do you think that was genuine, or do you think it was more of a just leave me alone? And just I'm gonna be cold enough, and you're gonna just say it's not enough, just to get you to leave me alone? Or was it truly he would have taken a job if there was enough money at play?
Yeah, I think it's I think first off, he was probably not interested because first off, he doesn't even give him the benefit or the privilege of looking at him, right? He completely keeps his back to them the entire time. So he already has sized them up. He already knows they pose no threat. If they pose no threat, it's likely they don't have any money. They're here. I mean, it could be a dime a dozen. He may run into this all the time. Even as a bounty hunter, he may be running into this where people are coming up to him and say, "Oh, we need your help. We need your help." Yeah, yeah, okay, whatever, right? And this is probably the same thing. I think he's willing to entertain it just because he's got no other place to go yet. He's still working on the ship, and it's the minute that they mention that, hey, we came a long distance. Okay, there's one thing that triggers, right? We've got money. Okay, I can use that money to hire Cara. Now, all this starts to kind of pique his interest, but but again, purely for selfish reasons. I don't think he had any intention of going in there to go help this poor little town, this poor little village, and this crap little planet. He's not doing that. He's got bigger things to do right now, bigger priorities. But at the same time, now that they've kind of put that out there, it does interest him, and it is for kind of selfish reasons, right? So I think it fulfills what his goal was at that point. So I think that's why he was okay, willing to entertain it, and
Sure. And
tow everybody with him.
Right. And it's one of those like, how bad could it really be out here? I mean, you guys are pretty, behind in what we have. So there was no threat for him that he thought he couldn't quite handle. He definitely wasn't expecting to have a walker, but.
Oh, so, yeah. They didn't disclose that either. I mean, that was the thing, right? I mean, he even says that a little bit later, or Cara says that you never even mentioned that.
Right.
So from there, let's get to the village. So they
all fairness, they didn't ask either.
Well, that's very true. But they get to the village, and this is where we're introduced to Omera and Winta. So the mother and the daughter that are kind of big in this episode. And here's a headcanon question moment kind of happening here. But have you put together any kind of your own backstory on what happened to the father or husband, or maybe not the husband, but just the dad of the child?
Well, with the way that she knows how to shoot, it kind of makes you think that they've been part of something before, and perhaps a war widow type of thing or whatever, or even like a rebellion type of situation, because clearly she has skills that she otherwise shouldn't have when we see everybody else there. And so it has to be something along those lines where they were part of something broader or bigger than themselves. And this was their escape to, get away from whatever past they had as well. That's kind of where I put it in my head canon, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And a part of me, I think, is that I think that would be interesting, that if maybe they were, I don't know, ex-military in some way or whatever. They don't have to be. That would be one thing. It could just be as simple as the dad was in the village at one point, and because of all these raids that have been happening, the dad at one point got his life taken from these raiders or from the Empire, or maybe they were, maybe there was a story where they were slaves, or they were working for the Empire, and when that fell, they left, found this village, and then they took residence here or something. I mean, your head can go a lot of different ways and a lot of different stories, but it's funny, they don't really mention the father at all, which is fine. But it's
Cara Dune, I think, is the only one who actually mentions that she's a widow, right?
Yes, yeah. He says something about you could stay here, this beautiful widow with this beautiful widow the rest of your life and all that. But yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting, and again, we'll talk about this here a little bit later about whether or not they come back to this planet. My guess is they will, and I don't want to steal too much here, but if they do, maybe there is some more story there, and we will get to know a little bit more about that. So that was the. There's another moment here where the Mandalorian. It's another parenting moment, right? She comes in. Winta comes in and says, "Can we play with him?" He's kind of hesitant, like I don't know, but yeah, go ahead and take him. And then they start to, and he's thinking, okay, they're going to play right here, no problem. The minute they start to walk out the door, he's like, whoa. And, she stops him. Mara stops him and says, no, it's going to be okay. Don't worry about it. That's a parenting moment. Like the first time you ever like have your child and you let them go somewhere else, or they're going to leave your sight. And you're like, I don't know. This doesn't feel right. It feels uncomfortable. But I think it speaks a lot to the relationship that is really starting to develop here between him and the child, and just how he perceives that relationship to be, at least from his perspective, that this is kind of like his child. Like he feels obligated to protect him. And we get a hard confirmation of this later on at the very end of the episode. But yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts around that?
Well, mine kind of came back more to Wenta, actually, of just how uncomfortable he is almost instantaneously when he goes into the hut, and it just basically any interaction with her was very odd. It was just, it wasn't in character. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of words in general, but that he can't seem to, he doesn't know how to behave or act, I think, in front of her, and just whatever he can do to keep himself busy and no idle hands and that type of thing. And even the words back to her. Why does he even have to say that things are kind of her? True mercenaries probably just grunt and kind of move about their way,
Right.
go eat
Yeah.
their dinner or something like that, right? So it's interesting just to see his reactions to being around someone, and just really how instant it was. And that's the kind of the curious part.
Yeah. Yeah. There are other moments too, like you said, that he seems like a really nice person, that he doesn't have to be a nice person. Like
Right.
there's a lot of dimensions to this character that we start to see over the course of all of these episodes. We get the first helmet moment here where, just kind of him talking about how he's never taken his helmet off since he was probably about, I'm guessing, around 10 or 11 years old, based on what he
Something like
says
that.
when he points at the kids, right? Not much
Right.
older than them. And this gets teased out a little bit later when she almost tries to take the helmet off of him. And we can just go ahead and talk about this all kind of together. But Kara asks him too, like, what happens if you take it off? And he says you can't ever put it back on. Do you think there's truth in that? I mean, that
That's
seems
it.
like it's what's that?
Her reaction was perfect. That's it.
That's it. Yeah, like what's the big deal, dude? But that seems like that doesn't seem like obviously Clone Wars era Mandalorians, right? This seems like it's something new, unless this is like an old tradition that we've never known about. And to my knowledge, this has never been the case. Mandalorians have taken their helmets on and off all day long.
Right.
I think they prefer to have them on all the time. But is this something like, you think this is like a new tradition that's come as a result of, them falling into the sewers and starting things anew and going to this only one person out at a time kind of thing? Is that, you think it's part of those traditions now?
I think so. And I think we talked about this in a past episode of, they've had to build this new culture, and
Mhm.
they have to build a new way of life, and just a new way, I guess, if you want to go that route. So it makes sense that they have to, again, they prioritize anonymity,
Right.
and then and hiding their numbers. It's almost like sand people, it seems like. But it's just one of those things of, you just want to make sure that you protect the clan as a whole, not necessarily just the covert, but just the entire clan of where everyone's at, the Mandalorian culture. And they're having to build something new. And to me, it makes a lot of sense why they would have things like this, that you take it off because you have to at some point. But why is there a need for you to show your face to another person? And even for procreation and those type of purposes, the finding of a mate for a Mandalorian is probably very different than this village of how they find partners.
Yeah.
And so it's the cultural aspect of it, play it in very, very different directions overall.
Yeah. There's got to be bylaws that allow you to take it off when you're on the can, when you're in bed with the other, the missus
Keep the
or the
lights off.
mister. The lights have to be off, right? I don't know. This is not, by the way, Spotchka. This is decaf coffee. So thanks, Phil, for the question there.
Okay, what's the point, Albert?
Yeah, it's just,
I don't understand decaf coffee.
I know. It's just a paradigm. I have no idea. All right. So we get to, they go out and start tracking, they use this I call it Mando Vision. I don't know what it's just infravision, but I thought Mando Vision sounds cooler. We'll
Predator
market that.
vision.
Predator Vision. Hey, Kara,
Yeah.
get on that, will you please, and get that copyrighted. But they use Mando Vision to track the footprints out there, and they realize that, okay, there's an ATST here, and they have this kind of, what moment when that happens, which I thought was pretty exciting, to be honest. I cannot remember, and I really cannot remember whether or not I knew there was an ATST in this episode or not. I want to say I don't, because I remember having a reaction when he says, or whoever says it's an ATST. I think it was Kara that says it because she identifies it, thinking, holy crap, what is that doing here?
Right.
Which is, I think, what they were going for. And so I don't know if it was that big of a secret or not, but I guess so thoughts on that. And the bigger question that we've talked about, why it's here. But
Why is it red?
Why is it red? Yeah. And no, go ahead. I got theories too, but go ahead. What do you got?
I don't have a theory on the red part at all, except it looks really cool. But yeah, this was again, this was unexpected.
Yeah.
I mean, and I liked that it was a surprise to them too, and I liked watching the reactions that they had to it. They're okay, 20 or 30 of these, backwater raiders. Yeah, it's a lot, but no big deal. They've analyzed kind of what it is until they see this giant footprint, and of course, Cara Dune knows exactly what that is because she's seen the damage that these things can do with skilled drivers. Do I have to put finger quotes around skilled with anything resembling the Empire?
Yes, the Empire. Yes, absolutely. It's mandatory.
I don't know. They were pretty good at killing Ewoks, though.
Ooh,
So, I mean,
too soon.
too soon? Oh, okay. But anyway, yeah. So I liked that reaction, though, that we got, that it was a surprise. Like, you didn't tell us about that. You know,
Yeah.
that was conveniently left out. But, and again, we've kind of talked about the, where the heck did this thing come from, which I don't know that we're going to get a clear answer there, but I need to know, Albert, why are the eyes red?
So the eyes
Tell me.
red. Oh, I don't know. Well, here's the thing. I don't have a problem with. I know some people took, I guess offense. I don't know. Probably offense not is the right word, but people were really kind of. There was a lot of chatter about why the eyes were red and who was driving it. And so let me wait. So before I talk about that, the legs and the reason it's red. There was a Lego set. I think it was the Lego set, or there was a picture. Maybe it was the concept art that was released. Shows that Chicken Walker had red paint, like it tribal paint almost, right? So you think it's the
That makes sense to me.
Cartoonians that did it, right? They just they took it, commandeered it. It's ours. We're going to put our touch on it, put our little spin, our flair on it, and so they painted the legs red.
Yeah,
that's probably
that makes
it.
sense.
The eyes red, though, I think it's purely just storytelling, right? It's purely visual, purely storytelling. It's not important that there is somebody in there and that you have to see the person that's in there. I mean, I think at one point when they shoot the left, was it the right eye and the hood goes down? It's almost like they took the eye out of this robot kind of thing. So it was just, I think it was their way, either Jon Favreau's way or the way Bryce Dallas Howard filmed this, or together. They wanted to present this thing as its own. It's a living creature, right? And I say living. I'm going to use air quotes on that, but I think that's all it was, and I liked it. I thought it was cool. Like it made it super eerie visually. I thought it did what it needed to do. Did it step outside of what we know Star Wars to be? I don't know, maybe a little bit. Not too far from like Clone Wars. I mean, there's things that have happened in there where I'm like, okay, that seems cartoonish, but we give it a break because it's it's an animated film. Here it's live. I don't know. I didn't have a problem with it. I'd like to hear what other people thought too about whether or not they liked the red eyes on the ATST or would have rather had somebody in there physically present that you could actually visually see in this particular battle scene.
Right. But like you said, this just makes for more interesting storytelling because it really does establish the tone of what these villagers are up against, and really, that they're completely out of their minds, that they've got to go. And I think the red eyes, I mean, it just looks terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine you get this giant, I mean, how tall are these things? Probably, 30 feet up in the air, something like that, at least. That's probably being very conservative, but that's just terrifying. Something that can spit, blasters at you. And then also, just the visual of it and hiding behind the trees, the visual that they did, the framing of the shot of having it just lurking in the background.
Yeah.
Where you kind of get it from the, what would be the equivalent of a nose up, and just the masking of the trees. It was just visually, it was just amazing. And that would be absolutely terrifying to be on the ground of, especially if you had really no idea what these things are, or where these, mechaniques kind of come from.
Wow, that's a fancy term. You've used homage and mechaniques tonight. So
we're classing this joint up, Mike.
Yeah, right. Moving on up to the east side. There's okay, so they get back to the village, and Mandalorian has like this great line, or where he just comes out and says, "You can't live anymore. You can't live here anymore. You got to pick up and move that kind of thing."
Come right to it, huh?
He just he doesn't pull any punches, straight talker kind of thing. But then he does like a 180 here, like on the spot, as Cara's kind of talking about this, and I mean he's obviously thinking about something, because he went from, "Hey, you're going to have to leave," all in the span of about probably about 30 seconds to a minute, to unless we teach them, unless we show them how to beat them. Right. Any thoughts as to why he would make such a quick departure? He doesn't care. I mean, he's got pennies here. He was already planning to leave anyways. So why is it? Do you think it's O'Mara? Do you think it's the child, and he's starting to see this as, hey, if we get rid of these guys, then maybe I can leave the child here and everything will be safe and fine?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was Winta, as well, because she was the one that says, "We're not leaving."
Mm-hmm.
And again, we get this impression that he's really not a bad person, and that he wants to generally do what, it's self-serving, but, generally wants to do maybe something resembling the right thing. And to know that if they stay, they're just lambs to the slaughter.
Right.
And that I'm assuming that kind of weighed on his conscience of like, we can at least give him a chance, and if him and Cara are able to take care of the walker, then they actually have a somewhat decent chance if they can shape them up. And of course, it's also an opportunity for us to get to our what's it called? God, Albert,
What?
What do they do in the 80s? All these things I've been complaining about for montage. Oh
yeah, man. We need a montage. We need one. And we get one here.
That's what he was thinking. Like, well, I've got to find a way to get an 80s montage in here. So we should stick around.
Right. We've had one in just about every other episode. So why not go for 4?
But yeah, so I mean, it kind of lends to the character of the Mandalorian of, we can't leave these people. I mean, at least he didn't say it. I like that he didn't come out and say that though, because that would be very cliche and that would be out of character. It lends more to him. I think it speaks more to him of more of a hidden message behind it, to where we have to speculate as to what the really driving motivation is about it. And so I like that they didn't just say, we can't leave them here to die, because neither one of these characters, that's not them. So I was very happy the direction that it went. And I like that Cara kind of pushed back. She's like, this is stupid. Like, you guys are dumb.
Yeah.
This is wiped out. And she got very emotional about it too. You're speaking about the acting here of God, we just looked
Gina
at
Gina Carano.
Yes, Gina. Goodness gracious. You would think it's Tuesday night or something. But yeah, I think the voice inflection he had, it was actually fairly impressive, for someone with really no experience, to have that. And you felt that she was trembling almost with some of those memories.
Yeah. J-Mac is digging deep here. Red eyes set against blue krill lightsaber reference. My goodness. Yeah, this is
that is a deep cut, J-Mac.
This is
nicely
all
done.
The Rise of Skywalker stuff coming back here. All right, so the plan is it's twofold, right? They've got to take care of the Raiders. They've got to take care of the ATST. Cara and Mando are in charge of taking out the ATST, while the Raiders are supposed to be get taken out by all the villagers that they go through this montage of training them. And this is where we get to. I really don't have a problem with the montage at all. I think it was good. It wasn't cheesy like maybe some of the other ones were.
I agree with you there.
Yeah. But there was a lot of people talking about like, okay, so why can she shoot? Why is she able to shoot? And I said at the time when this came out, I don't think it really matters. It doesn't matter in the scheme of telling the story, right? That's not important. What matters is to us as Star Wars fans, we tend to want to know these things, right? We want to know the backstory now. We want to know why there's more there. And for me, it's purely out of just a knowledge thing, not a sexist thing. And I think that's where a lot of people were taking this the wrong way. It's like, oh, there's a girl that can shoot and she can't miss and all that. And I mean, you're kind of missing the point 100% there in terms of what they're trying to do storytelling wise. But I think it would be interesting to know if she does have a background and if we ever going to get to that. And I think if they ever come back to that, which I think they will, I think at some point they will revisit this town, much like they did with Kuril's town and all that and Tatooine and everything. I think we will at some point come back to this town. And I hope we do get some more insight. I don't need to know everything, but it would be interesting to know that there's something there and it helps to feed or move the story forward that they're trying to tell, other than just, here's fan service, we'll go ahead and explain it to you kind of thing.
Right. I mean, and Noah in the chat has a good question. Why draw attention to it if it's not important? And I think to what you're saying is that it's not important for us to understand for the context of this story, but you're right. There is something more there that is interesting, that is worth going and learning more about and exploring that.
Yep.
And I'm with you. I really do hope we get something revisited here, because I think it was I think also what it also did is it gave the villagers a bit of hope as well, that they have kind of the ringer, right? They brought the ringer in. And so there is someone that can give them that little spark of hope. And clearly she's a leader in the community as well. And so having someone that they can draw on and be able to, and we see the progression, of course, and we don't get any suggestion that this is actually the case. So this is just us doing what we do.
Right.
Right. But I mean, it seems all plausible, right? I mean, you could fill in those gaps there, but I'm with you. I would love to revisit this. And again, it probably speaks to her, backstory with her husband and, why they're there in the first place. And I think some of that's interesting to explore. Now, how do you explore that in the context of the TV show? That's The Mandalorian, is a little bit of a different question of how you actually do that effectively without bogging down the story outside of maybe what our overall interest might be.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point. They definitely don't want to go down that path, right? It's slippery slope from there. There's from here they go and kind of, it's the bait and switch kind of thing, or bait and lure, or whatever it is. They go out there, start punching people in the face and trying to get them to kind of head out. And he's blowing stuff up in this series, which I really like, because I just think of Sabine and her constantly blowing crap up throughout all the Rebels. So it's nice to know that the Mandalorians kind of have that in their DNA. We talked about the red eyes, and and all that. So we'll skip that. But they get to. We'll talk about it just in general. I guess is the overall battle now that they've got the Raiders coming in. They have the AT-ST is kind of just standing there and not falling in. One of our supporters here said, why did it step right into the water like they wanted it to? And it's a great question.
Yeah.
I honestly watched this a few times and thought, okay, is there something else that's happening here? And the best I can guess, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. It's not a good theory, but when Cara runs over there and she starts taking shots at it, I think the person, whoever's driving this, or maybe the AT-ST, if you want to go down that route, looks and notices that somebody's sitting in there or maybe standing in that water, so it can't be that shallow, right? I think she was doing that partly to kind of help deceive it and pull it in and think, oh, it's not that deep, and that's why it went ahead and took that step forward when it didn't really have to at that point. But any thoughts?
I don't understand the digging of the trench either. I mean, I thought the digging of the trench, they were going to basically hollow out the ground, right? And kind of your normal pitfall trap, if you will, to reference the Atari game a little bit. But
Yeah.
it's just one. It was really confusing. But again, and I mean, her attracting it makes a lot of sense, though, of why they would continue to focus on her, because clearly you take out the biggest threat, right? And in that moment, she's that biggest threat that that they've got to take care of in order to kind of turn the tide of this thing, which is all of a sudden a lot harder than what they usually encounter. But it's a great question, though. A little bit of convenience. We have to have a little bit of convenience to get these things in, but I think there were other ways they could have done it that would have been a little bit more effective than how they did it. But this was exciting. I mean, it was like when she was stuck down, all of a sudden you're like, okay, how are they actually going to make this work?
Mm-hmm.
How are they going to draw this thing in? Because it was a bit of a stalemate there. But it's a great question of like, why didn't they just sit back there and just pew pew?
Yeah.
It was working.
What about any other favorite moments from the battle itself?
I'm trying to think.
We got Mando shooting people, disintegrating people, and it's so fast. I mean, the cuts are really quick. You don't really get to see it. You do if you've seen it a few times, but I don't remember him disintegrating people the first time I watch it. Maybe even the second time I watch it. But
right.
He's going back to his old ways there. And then Cara kind of calling that audible, I think was kind of cool. That kind of shows her experience. It shows her bravery. It shows her comfortness in. Is that a word? Comfortness? We'll make it one. But yeah, her, how comfortable she is in just going and taking on an AT-ST straight on in the midst of a sprawling battle that's kind of evolving all around her and all that. So I think it speaks to her veteran type thing. But
and that's what I took from the fight. I didn't find the battle overly exciting. There was nothing really super memorable about it in many ways. But the thing I did like, though, was the interaction of the Mandalorian and Cara Dune.
Yeah,
I think, and then that quick bond and trust that they had, and that to give her his rifle is a pretty big deal. And he does it a bit. I don't know if it was really all that casual. I'd have to kind of look and see if he hesitated. I don't remember off the top of my head, but for him to give her his rifle is kind of a big deal.
Yeah,
because again, he said before, weapons are they're my religion, so clearly he values them greatly. But that was the dynamic I enjoyed, though, was being able to see that trust and allowing each other that flexibility of saying, and kind of knowing what the other one is thinking in some ways. Like when they're trying to get out of the hut, he starts blasting holes in the door, or in the wall, I guess.
Yeah.
And she's just going to go and tank through it, which I was like, oh, man, she's beast mode. But those are the things I like to see, though. I mean, they really snap to each other, and it kind of makes you wonder with her military training, does the Mandalorian really have military training in that regard? And are the skills and the way that they fight and the tactics that they learn, are they really that similar? So those are the things that are going through my head, because I don't know, I had nothing better else to do.
No, I think you're right. I think, and I don't think he does, to be honest. And that's not a slight against him. I think, one, he doesn't have a jetpack, right? We know that. It seems like the Mandalorians have that knowledge, but it hasn't been imparted to him. And that may be primarily because of what he does today. He's a bounty hunter. He's more probably comfortable, more deft at one-on-one combat and one-on-one tactics and, extractions and stuff like that. Whereas once you get into a battlefield, that's a big difference. And I think they complement each other, right, in that regards. And we kind of see that a little bit later with not only him, but then Grief Karga kind of plays into that as well. IG-11 plays into that as well. They all do kind of work as a team, and that's kind of Star Wars. I mean, that's the Star Wars soup, if you will, where you've got all these different characters with different backgrounds, different personalities, and together they seem to always pull it off in some way, one way or the another. So I think that's great. And I think we're getting that here with Cara. We're getting to see that she has that breadth of experience and knowledge in ways of like tactical combat and battlefield type readiness type thing.
Right.
All right. So the battle ends. They're victorious. Again, very Seven Samurai. And we fast forward to weeks later, right? They make a comment very slight in there that it's been weeks now and they've been just kind of hanging low, hanging out there at the village. And it seems like the child's pretty happy here, right?
Right.
There's Mandalorians thinking about just leaving the child here, that this is a place where he can grow up. And to your point earlier, him retiring is really not his way. I mean, the way is he's more focused on rebuilding the clan or
Right.
the Covenant, right? But the helmet, right? She's about to take the helmet off. That's when we get the comment about he can't put it back on. We talked about the old ways, but do you think that they've actually him and Omera have actually done anything more than this? Because she seems to be I'm not going to say she's in love with him, but she seems very smitten by him, right? And she's never seen him other than his cold, callous ways. Maybe there's more that's happened in the background. In the weeks that transpired, there's more there, but she seems to be okay with hey, I don't care what's behind the helmet. I'm willing to roll the dice and pray that you're human.
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. There's they spent weeks together. I mean, you figure that they've done a variety of things in tandem and that they've got to spend time with each other. Now, what's probably not happened is them talking a whole lot. So I think to your point, it's still very superficial and it's still kind of, puppy love, type of ideas behind it. But clearly there's something there that she's attracted to him and there's something there for him as well. That's alluring to the whole thing because quite honestly, probably no other Mandalorian would have let her get that close in general. They would not have touched, their helmet, type of thing. So it was a really big deal where he even had a moment of hesitation. It was more than a moment that he actually seriously started considering this.
Yeah. Yeah. He was definitely all in that. He was probably thinking at some point, maybe loosely, that this was, he takes her with her. I don't know. Rescues her, gets her out of that town.
That would have been interesting.
Yeah. It's picking up people. Another, what did Kenobi call him? Another,
a pathetic life form.
Pathetic life form. Yeah. That's kind of what he was going for there. There's a quote in there where he says, "I'm leaving him here. Traveling with me, that's no life for a kid. I did my job. He's safe. Better chance at a life." And then he goes on to say that it's going to break, it's going to break his little heart. And he says he'll get over it. We all do. And I think that's, again, really speaking to the Mandalorian, looking at the child and thinking this is similar. He's similar to me in that he does not have a mother and father and that he is orphaned and he needs somebody to take him in, whether that's me, whether that's this village, whoever, but he is looking out for the best interest of him, which I think says a lot about him because he's really completely turned his back on the profession that he had. Maybe not his people, but certainly he's turned his back on the profession that he had in order to help someone he's not known for very long. So I think it speaks to the relationship they're kind of building here. And
is he naive or delusional for believing this though? Does he really believe that someone like the child who has the abilities that he's seen so far, that someone will not find that and someone will not want to exploit that and it will not, do it. So I just don't know that I buy that it was, that he was, I don't know. He seemed overly confident this was the right decision. And I think maybe to your point is, he gave him the head start that he needed.
Yeah.
He'll be able to develop into something and then be able to take care of himself. Maybe it was more that angle. But I think people with special abilities tend to surface at some point. And we've got plenty of examples where they don't, in Star Wars in particular.
Yeah.
But I think in general, when you have a unique species like that with unique abilities, it just seems like you're pretty ripe for someone to show up.
Okay. Well, before we wrap this up on some of the just aftermath questions, I just got one question here. How did the fobs work?
Because God, I don't know.
I mean, they had a fob.
They're keyed into midichlorians. We'll just bring up midichlorians. They're keyed into midichlorians somehow.
I was fine. I know Mike's really had this question out there, and I think he's thrown a couple of theories out. But I was fine with. I don't really care how the fobs work in chapter 1. I don't care how they work chapter 2, chapter 3, and then I get to this episode. I'm like, all right, fine, Mike Rondo, you win. How do the fobs work? Because I am confused now, and I do want to know how they work because of the fact that they were able to find him. But the point of all this really, and it's kind of, I'm being silly with the question, but really it's the realization that he can't leave the child here. He may never be able to leave the child here, because if they're able to track him to this remote location, then the only place that he's going to be safe at is with the Mandalorian, unless there's something else, like a Force user or somebody else that he feels is comparable in being able to provide the equivalent protection that he's able to provide. Until that happens, I don't think he's getting rid of this child.
No, I mean, he's kind of stuck with him, for lack of a better word. I mean, but it's the right thing to do. And that's why I was asking the question before. It just seemed naive. I think it was more naive than delusional. I think it was just naive that people won't come. But you had the fob, man. And how's only one person? And then how the heck did they track? I've got so many questions.
Right.
Mike, answer them for me. But I don't know. These things are a mystery, and they're keyed into something. But
yeah,
I mean, even the client, just kind of walking up creepy dad mode and walking up or creepy uncle mode and like waving in front of him, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
He's right in front of you. You should know that that's it, right? But anyway, it again speaks to your point. There's nowhere that's safe, and I think he finally had that realization that you're right. He's got to stay with me. This isn't going to end anytime soon. If he's going to have any kind of chance, we're going to have to keep the team together here.
Yeah. So I think we're going to see Amira again. I hope we see her again in season 2. I had other questions in there about, like, is this the end of the raids? Is it really over? My gut tells me it probably is. But then, she says that, once word gets out that this village, that this happened, right? They've been there for a few weeks. Cara says word's going to get out. People are going to start coming, trying to investigate, figure out what's going on. What happens to the village at that point? I don't know. I don't know that we'll get those answers. Maybe we do. Maybe that comes back in season 2 once they revisit and we get to see the aftermath, or kind of maybe Amira and Winter are gone, right? And they've been captured or enslaved somewhere, and the village is destroyed, and that becomes, part of the next storyline or a storyline or thread. But any thoughts around any of that?
I don't know that I need it, to be honest with you. I mean, I like the idea that the village is able to defend itself, and then they'll be able to repel what they need to. And I think, I think that it's reasonable to expect that story's going to get out of what happened here. Are they going to start asking them to help other things in other areas now, to where people start leaving the village? And maybe, something along those lines. So clearly things will never be the same there. And I think, to your point, if they were laying low, we'll just say if Amira and them were laying low, then this would definitely draw attention to them, where they might not want it either. But it doesn't, and there's so many conflicting things here, because it almost seems like she hasn't been off world at all in some ways, and that or maybe she's just really attached to this community. Maybe that's more of what it is. But I don't, it'd be interesting if she stays. And so that's, to your point. Again, we need to see how they bring her back in, if they do. And there's going to have to be something there. There's got to be that catalyst of why something has changed for her in order to make a different decision, or, like you said, something extraneous happens.
Right.
Another fancy word.
So I think we covered all the Easter eggs for this episode. The only one that we didn't touch on was the Womp Rat, where he says, "You little Womp Rat." I thought that was cool. I love when they do that stuff. So, but okay, so that's going to do it for this show. We'll be back on. Oh, before we go, so thank you to everybody that came into the live show once again. A lot of great questions here, and hopefully we try to call people's names out, but there's quite a few of them in here. So if I didn't get to you, come back next week and I'll try to get to you then. So thank you guys for joining us live. We'll have the show out sometime this week, I think. Mike, I don't know if you're still on. You can fill in on that. Well, and I'm with Brick Public. This is actually one of my favorite episodes of The Mandalorian, and I really can't put my finger on why, but it just kind of the whole episode was just really, really enjoyable. And so I'm with you, bud. Yeah, this was really good. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Brick Public, Noah, who's that? Music Train. Music Train. Yeah, all right. SP was in there. Yeah, SP had a great group. Yeah, and we appreciate more people showing up. It's a lot of fun. It's fun seeing the comments kind of come by. Steph, yeah, tell your friends, tell your mom and dad. No, don't tell mom and dad, but tell your friends, unless they're your mom and dad. Okay, we will be back next week for episode 339 when we head back to Tatooine, which I never thought we would go back to, at least not in this series, but we did, and we're gonna go there. One of the episodes I think is the worst of the bunch. It's got its moments where it's not, it's different. It's different.
is different.
Yeah, we'll be back next week to talk about the Gunslinger. Any final words before we get out of here, Mr. Jonesy?
You know what, Albert? She's got it where it counts. So
I was going to say until our paths cross as a reference to this episode, but I'll take either one.
All right.
All right. We'll see you guys next week.